This Black Mirror episode is titled I Feel Like a Woman. When the largest economic crash takes place in 2050, the government's solution for regrowth requires censorship of women and the female perspective, made possible through technology that physically mutes women through the click of a button. And we see this experienced by Jess, a 29-year-old woman who has continued to work as the investment advisor for a large firm on Wall Street, despite social repercussions. My inspiration for this episode comes from The Handmaid's Tales by Margaret Atwood and a show called Y: The Last Man by Brian Vahan. The title is inspired by Shania Twain's song Man, I Feel Like a Woman and the phrase behave like a woman. Themes that occur in this episode include feminism, the male versus female perspective, female voice, race and ethnicity, as well as sex and gender. Jess comes from a family of liberal educators who encourage her to do what she loves over starting a family. David met Jess through work and they are engaged. David comes from a religious background with pressure from both his parents to settle down and start a family. David met Jess 3 years before the economic crash and was greatly influenced by her and her family. Since the economic crash and social unrest, David's been struggling with his beliefs and values. The two live together in their new apartment, planning their future. Sasha is Jess's friend from college. She's a Black female writer. And Rex is also a friend of Jess from college, and he's a trans male who works as a film producer. Now, to set the scene, it's 2050, the largest economic crash has taken place, and there's been a radical religious wave fighting that women should not be allowed in the workforce as a solution to kickstart the economy. This radical group argues that a bigger population will increase economic growth while allowing God's plan to populate the earth through the role of mothers. A small group of highly educated feminists began to hack databases that reveal that the government has a 10-year plan that would begin by requiring an invasive medical procedure for women. The surgery would require all women aged 21 and up to have their vocal boxes removed as a way to make a male dominant society and to start the eradication of women as a part of society rather as a vessel to breed. Many people at the time of this being exposed viewed the procedure as a blessing from God, allowing women to live their full potential as mothers. Due to the controversy that arose from the plan being exposed, the government released the latest work on a technology that mutes the vocal box of women and used propaganda to market it as a non invasive solution that allowed women to be freed from their thoughts and worries. However, the technology did more than just mute their vocal boxes, but also restrain their bodies, leaving them prisoners to their own thoughts, though this was not advertised. The technology uses biomedical engineering devices to hijack bodily functions of all double X chromosome holders through the control of muscle movements. Databases of everyone's DNA allows for the device to function by proxy. A nationwide vote was casted to release this technology with the restriction of muting women in the workplace. The elections were rigged and it was passed to release this new technology. Over the course of the next 2 years, many women left their jobs and became stay-at-home mothers. Religious women took vows of silence to show their obedience to their believed hierarchy of patriarchy. Though women are allowed to work freely, an illusion of a separation between church and state has since formed. Women are highly encouraged to stay at home, so women who choose to work are seen as half women and are often discriminated against despite the law. In Act 1, Jess sits in a room filled with men. Her boss is at the head of the table. The men in the room are making inappropriate jokes throughout the meeting, and Jess is clearly uncomfortable. The boss explains that there's a major conflict with their accounts and that he's open to ideas for a solution. The men give ideas, but Jess makes mental note of the flaws in each solution. Jess raises her hand to share her well-crafted solution, of which she is quickly muted by an unknown man in the room. Her body freezes up, and she's unable to speak or move. The room acknowledges this as Jess's body has physically changed to an emotionless state. There's a bit of laughter among the room, but the men pretend to not notice, agreeing that this was the best move and they should continue on their meeting while she's muted. As the meeting comes to a close, the boss unmutes Jess quickly as his boss walks by the glass wall, glancing inside. In Act 2, Jess is talking to David about the meeting she had and how she was muted at work. It's revealed to the audience at this time that the use of muting is not allowed at work, but Jess has been subject to this harassment for the last 2 years. David chimes in, suggesting that maybe she should take some time off work, trying to convince Jess that a break would be healthy for her mental health. Jess grabs a bag of chips, eating vigorously out of anger. David is worried. He mentions that he does not want her to fall back into her habits. Jess looks at the chips, and David states that when she's stressed, she overeats. Jess's demeanor quickly changes from being frustrated to ashamed, and she leaves the room. David receives a phone call from his mom, and he shares the confrontation that just took place between him and Jess. David's mom shares her concerns, stating that she's been waiting patiently for grandchildren, it's unfair for Jess to be selfish, and that once the kids are in the picture, the children will need a present mother. David agrees, but points out that Jess is currently bringing in more income, so money is a bit tight while they plan their wedding. David's mother offers to let him borrow a large sum of money, of which he accepts, but asks that she does not tell Jess. Before hanging up, David's mom warns David to watch Jess's eating, saying that she needs to watch her weight if she ever wants to have a healthy pregnancy. David hangs up, walks past his room, and sees Jess sitting on the bed, scrolling on her phone and eating more chips. David hesitates but decides to mute Jess. He walks over to the bed, takes the chips, lays her down, tucks her into bed, and says that she needs to try and rest. Jess is fighting back in her mind, feeling betrayed by her fiancé. As David walks out the door, he apologizes under his breath. In Act 3, Jess walks out of her office building to meet two of her colleagues, Sasha, a black female writer, and Rex, a trans male in the film industry. They walk over to a sit-down restaurant. As they approach, the host looks at Rex and smiles and greets him exclusively. After sitting down, the host mentions to Rex that it looks like his hands are full, and before leaving, whispers into Rex's ear to just call him over if he needs him to mute any of the girls for him as a friendly male favor. Sasha and Jess overhear what was said and look at Rex, who is very uncomfortable. They apologize and offer to go somewhere else, but Rex brushes it off. He says he doesn't know how the two of them openly deal with this. Rex goes on to share that he's constantly reminded that he's lacking an X chromosome. Sasha speaks up, saying that he is fortunate to still have his voice. She goes on to share her experience as a black female writer and explains that it's been impossible for her to publish her work. Publications say that it's not because she's a woman, being that writing is the most appropriate form of communication for women because it can be altered and edited before being published, but instead openly admit that they don't accept her work because she is black. They ask Jess how she's handling everything. Jess admits that her experience does not compare, but that she is still dealing with men at work hackling and muting her, of which reminds Jess of the odd night when David muted her, so she brings this up and asks her friends what they think of this. Both admit that this was uncalled for and she needs to confront him about it. As the three of them finish up dinner, Jess asks Sasha if she'll come over tomorrow night for when she does confront David, of which Sasha is hesitant, but ultimately agrees to go for moral support. In Act 4, Jess and David are eating dinner when Sasha knocks on the door. The three of them catch up, leading David to ask Sasha about her work, of which she replies that it's been tough, as it has been for most women. David comments saying that this is what the world is becoming, in which Jess then asks if that's what he wants, and asks why he muted her the other night after their fight. David's hesitant, but lets out his fears of not having children, the pressure he's getting from his mom, and that he wants Jess to be happy. They fight until Jess breaks down in tears, feeling guilty for not being what David wants. She gets up from the table, asking Sasha to follow. In the next room, Sasha says she's going to head out, but Jess asks her for one last favor. Jess asks Sasha to mute her so that she doesn't ruin her engagement with David by saying something she would regret. Sasha agrees to mute Jess if that means she can leave, so Jess walks back to the kitchen. Sasha mutes her and leaves. David sees that Jess is muted, finishes his conversation, telling Jess that she should quit her job and that he would figure out finances, leaving out the part that he has borrowed money from his mother. Jess's mind at this moment is silent. She thinks no thoughts. David picks up Jess and walks to the bedroom. Act 5, Jess is sitting in her office preparing to quit for her job and imagining her life as a mother when she hears thuds. She looks around and sees bodies laying lifeless. Jess is confused and scared, so she rushes to the office building that David is in. On the street, there is chaos. Women are crying in the streets, holding Bibles and praying. Others are trying to make phone calls. Jess gets to David's office and finds him dead. The scene cuts to Jess, now at her mother's house in upstate New York. The two of them are on the couch watching the news. A female voice states that there's been a nationwide annihilation of men and that they are currently looking into the cause. Jess tells her mom that she almost quit her job today, of which her mother is concerned, allowing Jess to explain her past week and how her relationship with David has taken such a turn. As Jess speaks, she realizes everything she was about to give up and becomes shocked by her submissive behavior. Jess's mother smiles and hints that the passing of all these men is not the worst thing to happen. A flashback appears, revealing the history to this society and what brought it to this current state. This is the background context that I shared earlier. The flashback is interrupted by the female news reporter who announces that a new development has been made, explaining that the accident is due to a chemical pollution that females have been made immune to within the last 2 years of being exposed to the mute technology. She states that females have been saved by the very technology used to end them. The scene cuts back into Manhattan, where women, including Jess, her mom, Sasha, and Rex, are singing and dancing in the streets. They hold on to each other in circles. Rex notices he's being looked at and starts to feel uncomfortable. A woman comes up to Rex and looks at him intensely, in which Jess's mom tells the lady to back off, and the woman rushes away. In the final act, a week has passed and Jess is leading a meeting in her old office building filled with hundreds of women discussing how to restructure society. The women listen to each other, letting the other person finish a thought without interrupting, until a white woman suggests that they split into districts so that women can stay in their communities they've already formed, allowing the finances to be easier to divide, and ultimately because she doesn't want her child being around children from the ethnic neighborhoods within Manhattan. An uproar starts, and a Hispanic female speaks up saying that this is an opportunity to do things differently from how it has been done before, not only for women, but for all minorities. The scene cuts to a group of hundreds of women dressed in long dresses layered under cloaks as they march down the streets of Manhattan. Each woman is holding a mute remote. Back in the office, women cheer to show that they agree with this woman, while a handful of others begin to grab their belongings to leave the meeting as they disagree. The song Man, I Feel Like a Woman by Shania Twain starts playing in the background softly. The mob of women pause in the middle of the street, each holding out their remotes. Back in the office, Jess looks over at her worried friends. She gets the crowd to settle down and says, "Women, we must be on the same team if we want to see." Silence. The entire room freezes. They are muted. Jess finishes her thought in her mind, and this is shared with the audience as she thinks the word change. The lyrics, "Man, I feel like a woman," play. The screen blacks out. The television show Black Mirror uses different methods to create interesting dramatic stories, and a few of those methods include social commentary on theory, technological benevolence, and some sort of audience reflection. And I think that the episode that I just pitched fits in these categories. The social commentary on theory here is on feminism. My episode touches on the complexity and intersectionality of race and gender within feminism and how there is not one female perspective. There's also an interesting message of patriarchy and the effects that it has on society. Specifically, if we were in a situation where men were extinct, would the influence of men continue to live through a female experience? And we see this in my episode as Jess becomes submissive to her fiance David, giving into the patriarchy values of family and the role of a woman. An interesting shift happens when she asks her friend Sasha to mute her, which begs the question, is it possible for women to further the oppression of other women? This speaks to the area of audience reflection that Black Mirror is so well known for, leaving the audience with some self-reflection. As far as technological benevolence, we see here that there was a technology that was ultimately used to manipulate. Religion was used as a manipulation to further the agenda of a male-dominant society, but was packaged in a way that was supposed to boost this failed economy. It quickly results in a tool used to further oppress women and allow women to oppress each other.